Welcome to the Activation Podcast, brought to you by the Conscious Resistance Network. I'm your host, Derrick Bros. With every episode of The Activation, we'll be bringing you solutions in the areas of health, decentralized technology, permaculture, spirituality, and hidden truths. The Activation Podcast is focused on bringing cutting-edge solutions to empower humanity. Hey everyone, this is Derrick Bros with the Conscious Resistance Network, and today we are going to talk about solutions relating to our health. If you've been following my work at the Conscious Resistance for a long time, you know that we try to take a holistic view of the world. Not only do we investigate political corruption and corporate corruption and asking questions around those worlds, but also how do we take care of ourselves mentally, physically, spiritually? How can we make sure that we are free, not only in the outside world, but in our own bodies and in our own lives? And today is part of that conversation. Also, the guest we'll be speaking with today is going to be speaking at the upcoming People's Reset happening in September in Bath, UK, which I'm extremely excited about. This will be my second time coming to the UK. And it's a 3-day activation focused on how we can empower ourselves in all different areas: health, technology, community building, building parallel systems, growing our own food. I'm really excited about it. For those who want to learn more, you can check it out at thepeoplesreset.org. And my guest today is Patrick Holford, who will be one of our 24 speakers joining us at the event. Patrick, thank you so much for joining me. How are you doing today?
My pleasure. Very well. Thanks.
Well, I'm excited to get to know you. I was telling you before we recorded that I've been introduced to your work recently by Dan Aston Gregory, who I'm co-hosting, co-producing the People's Reset together with in Bath. And he's, part of bringing our event from North America to the UK is to discover all the amazing speakers and organizers and activists out there on that part of the world. And it's been really exciting for me to just learn more about other people who seem very similarly aligned and have similar goals. And so why don't we start with just you giving us a bit of a background, a brief introduction about your work and some of the books you've written, and then we can take it from there.
Great. Yeah. Basically, as a teenager, I had some mystical experiences, not drug-induced, by the way. Some of them came later. And it made me realize there's more to life. So I went to study psychology, and I got interested in two things. One was schizophrenia, because 1 in 100 people suffer this terrible condition. And the other was intelligence. I'll mention a bit more about that later. And I came across this double-blind, placebo-controlled trial of megadoses of B vitamins, which is completely new to me, done in Canada by a man called Dr. Optimum Nutrition Bible, who was the head of psychiatric research. And the results were extraordinary. They were really, really good. People were coming out of psychosis, not having hallucinations. And I jumped on a plane and went to meet this fellow. And I said, how many people have you treated? And he said, 3,000. And I said, what's your success rate? And he said, 85% cure. And I said, I've never met a cured schizophrenic. Please define what you mean by cure. And he said, free of symptoms, able to socialize with family and friends, and paying income tax. I had never seen a schizophrenic paying income tax. So in effect, I became a student. And a man came up from Canada with his son with schizophrenia to be treated. And the son got better. And the father bought 50 copies of his book. And he went back to Carmel, California, gave one to every doctor in the area. And one doctor had invited to tea a very interesting man called Dr. Linus Pauling. Now, Linus Pauling had 48 PhDs. He had 2 unshared Nobel Prizes, the only man ever to achieve that. And by the way, when Einstein was asked, are you a genius? He said, if you want a real genius, it's Linus Pauling. And very quickly, these 2 men, Linus Pauling and Abraham Hoffa, got together and developed a new form of medicine called Orthomolecular, the right molecules. Today we hear about functional medicine. It's the same thing, developed by a friend of mine, Dr. Jeff Blandel. I started the Institute for Optimum Nutrition. And the basic premise, which actually goes all the way back to Darwin, is it's the conditions of existence that we live in. It's our diet and it's our lifestyle that drives our evolution and drives our health. And basically, I've spent the last 45 years focused on that. I've written 48 books. The latest just out is called Upgrade Your Brain. And we'll talk a little bit more about how to actually do prevention, because we have a health service in every country that I'm aware of that isn't even beginning to ask the right questions, let alone actually do anything that's going to prevent disease. It's drugs all the way. So that's how I got into it. I'm now the head of a charity called foodforthebrain.org, which has an international mission to prevent Alzheimer's, which, by the way, is a preventable disease with less than 1% caused by genes. And I'm sure we'll go into that a little bit.
Well, I hadn't. That's beautiful introduction. I hadn't heard about these studies related to schizophrenia. That's pretty powerful stuff. I could see why you would be intrigued and commit your work to learning more about that. And congratulations on the 48 books. I definitely look forward to diving in and learning more about your work on that front. Before we get more into specifically what you advocate, let's talk about the problems. We like to focus on the solutions, but what do you see are the current problems with diet, with the general health of the average person, whether in America or the UK, et cetera?
Well, it's much deeper and worse than we think. We can, of course, talk about obesity and diabetes and heart disease and cancer and other such things, which are appalling and happening to so many. But the reason I got very focused on mental health, and I'll tell you a few things that are kind of mind-blowing. We may or may not go into the details of it, but basically, Homo sapiens, we split from chimpanzees, bonobos, and gorillas 6.5 million years ago. Their brain size has stayed exactly the same. Like a chimp's brain is 350 grams. And Homo sapiens peaked about 20, 30,000 years ago with a brain size a little bit below 1,700 grams, cc. And now it's 1,330 grams. So we've lost 20% of our brain size in 20,000 years. And we also are losing at the moment about 7.7% IQ per generation. Mental health problems are absolutely exploding. We have 1 in 6 children, possibly higher, classified as neurodivergent. Autism has gone up massively in the last 2 decades. At the other end, we have dementia affecting so many. We have 1 in 6, probably more in the US, on antidepressants, many of whom can't get off it. So I focused on dementia partly because, what a terrible way to go. I mean, literally to lose your mind in the last few years of your life, which is not necessary. But I think what's happening is, despite all the terrible health problems, which are really not a consequence of a lack of drugs, which is the current sort of paradigm, so to speak, the issue is that our intelligence is decreasing. Our mental health is decreasing. We have the Federation of European Neuroscience Societies say we have a brain health emergency. In the UK, the Children's Society have reported a tripling in referrals in children with mental health problems. So even if we all decided, as we should, to tackle environmental issues and diet issues and so on, the biggest problem is lack of intelligence. And you can kind of see this in the dumbing down of our politicians, just as an example. So it's why I was very interested in intelligence in the first place. One of the comments I loved on one of my posts on vaccines during COVID time was, shame there isn't a vaccine against stupidity. And I said, yeah, the queue would be too long. So there are only really 2 fundamental drivers of disease. One is ignorance and the other is addiction, if you really trace it down. So the biggest problem we face right now is complete ignorance about what it is that's driving all of our diseases, which is largely diet. And what I'm going to address at the conference are what I call the 4 horsemen of the mental health apocalypse. And they are brain fats, terribly important, like omega-3, vitamin D, and phospholipids, B vitamins and vitamin B12. And we've currently learned that the 2 have to work together. A lot of people are B12 deficient. One of the biggest drivers of B12 deficiency, which happens later in life, are the antacid drugs called proton pump inhibitors like omeprazole. And then we have sugar and refined carbs. And then the last is to do with antioxidants, which is fruit and veg and herbs and spices and so on. So if you eat a high sugar, high carb diet, which most people do, and don't get enough brain fats, which most people don't, and not getting enough B vitamins and maybe malabsorbing B12 later in life, which is incredibly common. About 60% of Americans, for example, have that issue. And you don't have enough fruit and veg and herbs and spices, you are going to accelerate your degeneration of brain and body and spend several years with dementia. So that's the problem, or at least one of the problems.
Wow. So, I mean, you pointed to a lot there. So I like that you narrowed it down to ignorance and addiction. And when you speak about addiction, are you speaking more in terms of, like, say, the psychotropic drugs, the SSRIs and antidepressants you mentioned, or addiction to unhealthy foods, sugars, et cetera, or maybe a combination?
Yeah, well, I mean, certainly, sugar, caffeine, alcohol, and so on. So, the usual scenario that we get into is we're tired. And as a consequence of being tired, we use caffeine to wake us up. So we've got to have caffeine to wake up, and sugar, because that gives you fast energy. And the more you use these things, the less effective they are. So you need more coffee, you need more sugar, more stimulants. And then you can't relax. You're kind of in a stressed out state. So in the evening, you need more alcohol. And alcohol only works for about an hour. It does actually work. It switches off adrenaline, but the effect is short-lived. So you have another drink and so on. And then you wake up even more tired and more anxious and more grumpy. So, and then someone says, hey, by the way, it's, maybe one coffee is enough, but not six, or, sugar isn't good for you. And it's okay to say these things, but, people literally become addicted. So that's it. Yeah. But of course, we also, you're quite right. What most people don't realize, the most prescribed drugs at the beginning of the century in America were cocaine and heroin. They were prescribed drugs. And when they were illegalized, and actually the mafia who'd moved in to supply alcohol during Prohibition, and when alcohol was no longer illegal, they didn't have a job to do. And then heroin and cocaine were made illegal. So they thought, oh, fantastic. Now we can supply all the addicts. And right now we have a situation where, and this is all published studies, 1 in 2 people on antidepressants will have severe withdrawal effects if they try to quit. And half of them, they will be so severe that they cannot quit. They get flashes and anxiety and insomnia, and they really feel like they're going crazy. So I think we've slightly forgotten. I mean, everyone's banging on about OxyContin, which of course is terrible and causing so many deaths. But we seem to be fine about, sleeping pills and antidepressants and so on. And we're not asking the question, the underneath questions, which is, why can't I sleep? Why am I depressed? Why do I have diabetes and so on? And, that's the key. You can't really have a health reset. I mean, funny enough, today in the UK, I was reading an article in The Guardian. They've now got a prevention professor appointed with Labour. And their idea of prevention is to prescribe a yearly injection of this terrible drug called inclisiran, which lowers your cholesterol. So the idea of prevention is more drugs. We had another piece in the Guardian, which was saying that it was the COVID vaccine czar in the UK that was saying we need a COVID vaccine-like campaign on dementia to prescribe a drug for dementia. And by the way, the drugs that have been hitting the headlines, which are antibody injections, so it's very close to that whole mRNA territory, have dismally failed in numerous studies to actually do anything of any clinical significance at all. The last 2 trials actually killed 7 people. And they got, the last trial increased the rate of brain shrinkage in the people with dementia on the drug compared to placebo. Increased brain shrinkage. Now, I'm going to show you very quickly here. This is our manifesto at the charity. But down the top is the shrinkage in yellow of areas of the brain on placebo. And down the, on one side it says placebo. And on the other side it says vitamin treatment. And basically what happened here, and this is a double-blind controlled trial out of Oxford University, giving B vitamins. I mean, 10 cents a day, non-toxic, remarkably cheap B vitamins, caused 9 times less shrinkage of the Alzheimer's area of the brain. For the whole brain, it was 73% less shrinkage. So on the one hand, you've got a drug which gives you 20% more brain shrinkage and actually has not proven any clinical effect and costs, upwards of $60,000 a year. And has killed 7 people in the last 2 trials. And on the other hand, you've got a vitamin which costs you 10 cents and reduces the rate of brain shrinkage by 73%. And no one's talking about it. So this is corruption at the deepest level. So prevention is not taking more drugs. So we're going to hear that. We're going to hear more and more talk about prevention. And it's just going to be a sexy way of basically saying, we've got drugs to sell you that don't work, and we want to give them to people who probably don't even need them.
Wow, that's remarkable, Patrick. And it's. I think you really hit the point there as far as whenever the government or these big public programs talk about wanting to help people's health, it's more take more medicines in the form of pills that big corporations profit off of handsomely, of course, instead of what you're discussing, which sounds more like let's get to the actual root causes of the problems and the traumas that we're having. Let's not just address them with more injections or more pills, which don't even actually help in the long run in the first place. So I don't want you to give away your whole speech and everything, your presentation you're going to share at the People's Reset, but the 4 Horsemen sounds really exciting, really interesting. Maybe we could spend a couple moments kind of diving into some of those pieces, and you can elaborate more. And then some of the things you mentioned as far as like brain fats and B vitamins. One of the discussions I hear online is people pointing out that, vegans have to supplement sometimes for vitamin B and for omegas and things of that sort. And I think that's true, and most vegans probably do go in that direction. But is it also true, or has your work shown that, as I think you were touching on a moment ago, that the vast majority of people, whether they're eating plants or eating animals, are deficient in these things as well? Is that accurate?
Yeah, it kind of is. And there's a couple of points worth sort of illustrating here. So I live in Wales, beautiful Black Mountains of South Wales. And on the coast, in the Gower Peninsula, they found a 40,000-year-old Homo sapiens. It's one of the oldest complete skeletons. And the skeleton was surrounded by this incredible jewelry and necklaces made out of shells. And the assumption was it was a woman because of all of this. But when they did the DNA analysis, they found it was a man. It's called Pavilan man. And when they analyzed the bones, they concluded that almost a quarter of their diet was seafood. So the reason I'm mentioning this is twofold. Number one, how the hell did we go from a 350-gram brain of a chimpanzee up to a 1,700-gram brain? How did Homo sapiens evolve in the first place? It's a really, really important question. And it wasn't the genes, because we're only 1% different. So it had to be a change in the conditions of existence. Now, I won't go into all the evidence, but I'll give you one, very simple example. And it was Sir David Attenborough who kind of brought this alive, because he said when a human baby is born, they're born with a waxy waterproof layer called the vernix. It's the white stuff that's washed off. He said, I've never, ever seen that on a land-based mammal. I mean, never. I wonder if it occurs, he said, in the marine mammals. And a marine biologist in Canada picked up on this. And sure enough, seals, the marine mammals, who were land mammals who committed fully to the ocean. A dolphin, for example, has every single bone we have in our hands and arms in its flippers. They have a vernix. So what I'm trying to say here is that only logical explanation for how Homo sapiens evolved this large brain is that we were the waterside ape. We started to wade in water. It's how we became upright. We ate a lot of marine food. Just like, that 40,000-year-old Homo sapiens. I mean, why go hunting for animals who have a terrible habit of running away when your rivers and estuaries and coasts and lakes are absolutely packed full of marine food, so fruité del mar, so to speak, very rich in all the nutrients, omega-3, the B12, iodine. I mean, all the nutrients that actually are the kind of hallmarks of brain function. So, but the other point about this is that this ancestor must have been doing 2 or 3 times the exercise of most of us. In other words, hunting, gathering, fetching wood, and so on. So the point is not... The point is that if I was to try to achieve the same intake of nutrients, antioxidants, B vitamins, etc., of this ancestor, I would have to have half my entire diet as seafood. So it's not just about, seafood, because for reasons I can explain, it's very clear that we had both a plant-based diet and a marine diet. But the point is we have moved so far away from the environment that created Homo sapiens that, surprise, surprise, we are not evolving. We are actually devolving in every way, and it's accelerating. And something that is really, really critical is the speed of epigenetics, the effect of the environment on us, is fast. In 1900, if you wanted to get into the army, the British Army, to fight in the Boer War in South Africa, you had to be 5 foot tall. just 5 foot. We didn't know about protein. The industrial age diet was deficient in protein. And in the early 1900s, we discovered protein, go to work on an egg, the good British breakfast, and bacon and sausages and all that kind of thing. And literally within 50 years, men have gone from 5 foot to 6 foot. And that's why if you visit the UK and you go to one of these old cottages in the 1800s, you go, oh, people were really small. So it only took 50 years for this change. And what we are experiencing now, we are at a critical point. It's not going to be slow. We're going to have an acceleration of decline in mental health. So yeah, absolutely. Vegans have to supplement B12, that we know. Also probably supplement omega-3 DHA. That's the one that builds the brain, which you can, there are certain algae that actually fix DHA. So you can get vegan DHA. I mean, I think the whole, plant-based, plant food movement, I mean, the true movement of it is fantastic. Organic, whole, back to the earth, eating real foods and so on. There's a little bit of a blind spot on fish. And you think of Seaspiracy, where, we see terrible things going on in the ocean, which is basically just hunter-gathering in the ocean, just collecting all the fish. But in Japan, where I'm off to, and I want to tell you about what we're doing in Japan and China, because it's kind of world-breaking. What they've done is they've taken areas between islands, and they've stopped all trawling. They've planted seagrasses and seaweeds. They've studied the species of fish they want back. One of them loves tubes. They've created artificial reefs. And they've basically completely regenerated the marine food web. So in a sense, we're in a situation where if we understand that nature is powerful and intelligent, and all we have to do for ourselves individually, but also for the planet and everyone, is to create the right conditions of existence, and the force of nature will kick in and reward us, 1,000-fold. Or there are those who want to control. And they want to control health, they want to control money, and they just want to control. It's a little bit like ego versus essence. It's kind of what it boils down to. So by asking the right questions and going deeply, there are solutions. There really are solutions. And that's what we've been focusing on at the charity foodforthebrain.org. And I'd love to tell you a little bit about our global mission there, because it's really cranking up.
So I've recently partnered with my friend Sean Hawkins of the company Cultivated Mind. He focuses on organic mushroom extracts, which are designed to help you physically, mentally, and maybe even more than that. I've just been testing them out recently. You may have seen my interview with Sean discussing this. We went over some of the specific benefits of the various types of mushrooms that Sean uses. I think it's a really exciting product to be a part of, because not only are they organic, they're non-GMO, but if you know anything about mushrooms, as more and more of us have been learning about the benefits of mushrooms, not just psychedelic mushrooms, but all types of mushrooms, then you understand that they are a great boon to your health. So Sean recently hooked me up, and I've been trying the Brain Squared, which is for gut pea flower extract, ashwagandha. I also recently picked up the Radiant Energy, which is for pre and post workout. So I go to the gym 3 or 4 times a week, and now starting to take these before and after. These feature cordyceps, reishi, and chaga. And finally, he's got Immune Renew, which is obviously for immunity. This one features chaga, turkey tail, reishi, maitake, shiitake, and extract of nattokinase. I encourage you to go visit the website. It is cultivated-mind.com. And of course, we have a special deal and a discount for those of you who want to purchase them through my link at cultivated-mind.com/cm/bros, BROZE. You can check out the link on the screen right now, or wherever you're watching, check out the link below the video. Yeah, absolutely. We'll definitely get into that. Just one other question that came to mind after what you said. So, in my research, it's not only that meat eaters, vegans, et cetera, are deficient and some of these much needed ingredients for the brain and for the body, but that can also be traced back to the soil being deficient, the soil being depleted. Is that part of your analysis as well? Is that something that you or your organizations have researched?
Well, it is, but also, I mean, people say, what's the single reason, for example, one might need to supplement? I'd say that the single reason, not the only reason, is we don't eat enough, because our ancestors were expending, 2-3 times the calories. They ate much more. It was all organic. It was all whole. So we've got basically much less calories to get all that zinc and selenium and everything else in it. And it isn't, of course, if the food is refined. And then if the soil is robbed, I'm actually working, we have a farm in Wales, 20 acres. And I'm working with a brilliant man called Dan Kittredge at the Bionutrient Research Institute. And he's measured organic and biodynamic and zero dig. We're doing all of those things and so on, all of which have tremendous importance and merit. But actually, funny enough, they don't predict, the farming method does not predict the nutrient density. The only thing he's found that predicts the nutrient density is a measure of the respiration of the soil. Yeah, the soil is breathing. I mean, you can literally measure it. Why is the soil breathing? The soil is breathing if the microbiome is healthy. And what makes the microbiome healthy? And the answer starts, with the minerals in the soil. And a lot of the minerals that we lack on the land, due to erosion and glaciers and whatever, are sea minerals. So that project they're doing in Japan, for example, bringing back the marine food web, will create, capture carbon, create jobs, create fish, and also will create lots of seaweed, which we actually need to put on the land because it brings the minerals from the sea, like selenium and iodine and molybdenum and boron, into the soil, which creates the healthy microbiome. And the plants, in effect, capture all that beautiful sunlight energy, turn it into sugar to feed the microbiome, which in return passes back all these wonderful nutrients, which then come to us. So yes, plant nutrition, human nutrition, it's totally connected. So once again, part of our revolution has to be, reminding people how to reconnect with nature. And I mean, I was watching a lovely lady, happens to be a Swami the other day. She's a beautiful woman. And she was working at our place and doing amazing gardening. And she smokes and she eats badly. And I said, it's extraordinary because you have such a love of nature, and the environment and the world around you. And what you do is truly amazing. And yet your first environment is your body. I mean, we are born literally with only two things. One is consciousness. We can't say where it comes from. We just have it. And there's no evidence that it goes anywhere. I mean, we had to have evidence when you die. What happens to consciousness? We don't know. We don't say. And the other is our body. That's all we have is consciousness in our body. And somehow humanity has become so disconnected from nature and our body and so on that it's possible for us to consume things that are completely toxic without a thought of it, and then become addicted to them, and then really struggle to come off them. So there is a kind of an awakening that needs to occur. And
absolutely.
Of course, and that awakening is wonderful because what happens is you get more energy, you get more brain power, you feel better. So even on a selfish basis, nobody wants to feel sick and feel awful. But also that energy kind of increases intelligence and it increases, the energy we have to not only transform ourselves, but look at ways that we can help others as well.
Exactly. I mean, I think it's such an important point, the disconnection from from nature. And, what you were talking about there, Patrick, I often tell people that, we talk about localization, the importance of that, but the most local you can go is yourself, and focusing on yourself, helping yourself, healing yourself, not only physically, mentally, et cetera. So it's an important point and one that we definitely try to promote here. One other question on your analysis, you're triggering so many important, I think, dialogues, and we could go into each of these for hours plus here, but you mentioned boron, and that is something interesting to me because I've only started to learn more and more about boron deficiency. My partner Miriam, she's researching this heavily and trying to reverse her boron deficiency that she found out about after doing some hair analysis. Could you speak to that a little bit, and what role you think boron deficiency, among the others you've already discussed, plays a role in our debilitating health?
Well, yeah, and boron, what happens kind of in the real world is some of these ultra trace elements that we don't need much of, possibly micrograms. A microgram is 1,000 milligram, 1,000 gram, are actually very hard to analyze. So not all the labs measure these things because they don't have sufficiently sensitive equipment. So they kind of didn't exist or didn't make the A list of essential minerals like zinc, iron, and so on, but they are essential. And boron has a role in immunity. It has a role in bones. It has a role in joints. It may have a role in other things that we don't even know about yet. So there's a whole lot of these ultra trace elements. I mean, iodine is one, selenium is another, chromium is another, manganese is another, which have sort of got forgotten because there's been this very linear idea that, we're like a machine and we just need sugar for energy and protein for muscle and, a few vitamins that A, B, C, D, E that kind of made the list. And so, there's probably more, that we're going to discover. Copper, for example, is important too. And it's only really by studying, the whole principles of nature and also, the sea and the land and how they interconnect, that we get back to these, essential elements. So what we're doing in Wales actually is we're starting to grow food and measure the nutrient content in food and learn what are the conditions that make it healthy. So we can literally connect soil, food, gut, brain, the whole lot. See, I like boron.
Yeah. I've been learning a lot about it. It seems to be pretty interesting. And I think you're correct that we'll probably discover even more important components to a healthy human body that we just haven't discovered or haven't really, at least us lay people who are just following the food pyramid and what they're told at school, haven't really properly been taught about, understood. So let's speak a little bit about your organization and the focus of that, because I know you're going to be getting into more of the specific of the Four Horsemen at the People's Reset. Again, everyone, this is happening in Bath on September 27th to the 29th, and it will be streamed for free online all over the world, but we would encourage you to come in person so you can meet Patrick and hear more of his discussion. But tell us more about the organization you're involved in and the work you're focused on.
Okay, so first of all, if you go, okay, prevention's important, that's what we need to do. And imagine you were running the government or the health department, or we want to do prevention. I mean, how do we do it? Do we have adverts saying eat less sugar or eat more organic or whatever? How do you actually do prevention? Now, what actually happened was in the 2010 to 2015, there was this phenomenal research showing that you could really impact preventing Alzheimer's. And the man who did it with the B vitamins and omegas, which had decreased the brain shrinkage by 73%, was the second in charge at Oxford University Medical School, professor of pharmacology there, Professor David Smith. And I said, now what? And he said, well, I hope within a few years it will be standard health policy. And I said, well, what will that policy be? And he said, well, first you have to measure cognitive function and this is if someone's thought to be developing, dementia, they have a cognitive function test. And he said, you can pick up changes in cognitive function 40 years before a diagnosis. So number one, do the test. Number two, measure something in the blood called homocysteine. And if it's raised, then you need the B vitamins. So our charity, foodforthebrain.org, not-for-profit organization, foodforthebrain.org, got permission to digitize the cognitive function test, which anyone can do. It's not a questionnaire, it's interactive. And almost 500,000 people have done it, which is quite a lot. And by the way, I've just literally come back from the States and Canada, where we have a campaign launching in Canada, then Australia and New Zealand. And I was meeting a Chinese group who have 13 million members. They're going to launch it in China in November, and Japan also. We're doing translations of all of this. So we expect to reach millions of people who do the online test, which is free. Then you fill in a questionnaire on your diet and lifestyle. It then shows you exactly what's driving your future risk. It's called the Dementia Risk Index. So if you're doing everything right, you score 0%, no future risk. If you're doing everything wrong, 100%. And it shows you what it is. It might be a lifestyle factor like lack of exercise, or it might be smoking, alcohol, B vitamins, omegas, whatever it is, but it shows you what to do. And then recently we've developed a pinprick blood test, which is available everywhere. And by the end of the year, we hope literally across the globe, which measures precisely the things that I'll be talking about, the omega-3 and the vitamin D and the homocysteine for the B vitamins and various other things. So one pinprick test, relatively inexpensive. All of this data is going into a massive database, anonymized, so it protects people's privacy. It's all charitable. It's on a database which over 7,000 universities can plug into. So we can now actually do prevention on a global scale with millions and study people who make no changes and what happens to them. Because every 6 months you redo the cognitive function test. And we can study what is the perfect combination that prevents this from occurring. And it's not, and I just sort of end this with a thing that wonderful professor at Oxford published 300 papers, genius scientist, impeccable research, undeniable, humanitarian. Why do scientists do this research? So that it becomes part of health policy and helps people not develop preventable diseases like dementia. But it's been ignored. So in other words, the whole system is broken. The good science, even if it's being published in journals, is not impacting thinking at all. So we decided we're not going to try and change doctors. We're not going to try and change the health service. We're going to go direct to the people. It's a digital health age that we live in. It's going to be a digital health revolution. And everyone who gets involved is all funded by the people who get involved. They chip in $100 or something if they wish to. It's funded by the people. It's science for the people. We share all the results back to the people to motivate them to make the changes. It's citizen science. And there's no reason why this model that we've developed and is really starting to take off now can't be used by many other organizations in similar ways. So it's like a parallel. Take care of your own health and we'll guide you and help you. It's not for profit. No one's trying to make a big buck out of you. There are no shareholders. There's nothing to sell and so on. And so I think we've hit on a way that we can actually, do something quite significant.
Wow, that sounds amazing, Patrick. Thank you for sharing about that. And that makes me honestly really hopeful and optimistic. Again, my partner, her family deals with Alzheimer's and dementia. Many people, I'm sure in this audience, have had to help family members who struggle with that and maybe worry about it being something genetic that they may face in the future. But I think that the work you're talking about here gives us a little bit more hope that, again, the power's in our hands. We do have the power to affect our future and to affect our health if we choose to consciously reconnect to the planet and take control of our diet and the things we're putting in our body. That is, it's super exciting. It makes me even more excited to have you speak in Bath. So can't wait to meet you in person, Patrick. Let everybody know, where can they find, all of your websites, your personal website, as well as for the organization. I'm going to take a couple notes and share them. The Dementia Risk Index, foodforthebrain.org, the Bionutrient Research Institute. You mentioned a bunch of great things, and I'll include any links you'd like to share.
The website is foodforthebrain.org. Just go there, click on, take the test, get on it. It's so simple. It's all free, and it really does it. I've now got a team of 14 of the world's leading professors, all working for nothing because they know this is the only way. And because I've been deeply studying with all of them, I'm being able to write this book called Upgrade Your Brain. It's on Amazon, it's in Kindle, it's on Audible and all the rest of it. It's just come out. And it's the consequence of all these people who've spent, a lifetime working on one thing. And I'm like, they're the masters. I'm the jack of all trades. I put the pieces together. So anybody out there who really wants to get involved, do the test, read the book. The two go parallel. And I just, want to just end. I write poems every now and again, but dementia is such a terrible thing. Losing your mind. Anyway, so I wrote this little poem called Demented. It says, what's it all about? All these people checking out. Years of memories erased, whole lives dematerialized. A one-way ticket out of here, filled with anxiety and fear, empty shells upon the shore, a life not worth living for. The product of the human race, rich in wealth, but lost in space, or a race for profit. What a disgrace. And that's where we're at. We're actually witnessing right now the same kind of thing that happened with statins, but at a worse level, where we have appalling drugs that do not work, that cost a fortune, that are going to literally kill people, and they're being sold to us under the guise of prevention. And we have to wake up and say, no, we do not accept this. And at the same breath, take responsibility. And the first thing to take responsibility for is your own health, and be encouraged that it actually is not that difficult to at least get to the point where you will never lose your mind. Your skin may get wrinkly, You may lose the color of your hair. If you exercise, you don't need to lose the function of your legs. And there's a quick point there. The average woman in the EU is going to spend 14 years of their life unable to climb 10 steps. And you go, shocker. I must exercise. I must keep my legs strong, because that's what's happening to people if you do not exercise. But you don't think it's genetic. You don't think it's in the genes. Same thing with Alzheimer's and dementia. It's not in the genes. It's like a muscle. You have to exercise it with not only the right food and nutrients, but also literally with exercise. You need to keep active socially, mentally, and spiritually as well. Connectedness is so important. And eat the right food, do the right thing, keep yourself physically active, and then, take charge of your life, and then contribute to ways that we can help others. And our charity, foodforthebrain.org, is all about making that possible.
That's so much great advice packed in there. And again, it is time for us to wake up and take our health back into our own hands. And yes, absolutely, to worry about and think about the next generations. Patrick, thank you so much for joining me. Everyone, I will include all the links below wherever you're watching. Highly recommend checking out his websites, his book. I'm going to pick up a copy of that book. And again, if you can come in person to Bath, UK, September 27th to the 29th, join us at the People's Reset. Check out thepeoplesreset.org for more information. Until next time, as always, remember, you are powerful, you are beautiful, and you are free. Thank you for listening to the Activation Podcast. You can find the archives to our show at SoulStream, Pinecast, Spotify, and theconsciousresistance.com. Thank you for listening.